On October 20th, 2020, police responded to a distress call at an apartment complex on Oak Street. What they found inside would haunt them for years: the lifeless body of 30-year-old Ethan Reed, a beloved local high school teacher, lying in a pool of blood. The prime suspect? His girlfriend of 2 years, Olivia Rogan, a 26-year-old software engineer. As investigators dug deeper into the case, they uncovered a chilling web of surveillance, manipulation, and escalating control that had ensnared Ethan in the months leading up to his death. Hidden cameras, meticulously placed throughout his apartment, silently told the story of Olivia's growing paranoia and obsession. Olivia Rogan's descent into becoming the central figure in a tragic true crime saga began long before she met Ethan Reed. Born in 1993 to Margaret and James Rogan, Olivia was raised in a middle-class suburb of Portland. Those close to the family noticed from an early age Olivia's intense need for attention and validation. Reflecting on her daughter's arrest, Margaret Rogan recalled Olivia's childhood. She was an exceptionally bright child, always top of her class, but she struggled to form lasting friendships. At first, I thought it was just shyness, but as she grew older, I noticed how possessive she could be of the few friends she did have. If they spent time with others, Olivia would become withdrawn and sullen. This pattern continued into Olivia's teenage years. Her high school boyfriend, Alex Chin, later told investigators about Olivia's constant need to know his whereabouts. "She would call or text nonstop when we weren't together," he said. "If I didn't respond quickly, she'd show up wherever she thought I might be. At the time, I thought it was because she cared so much." Despite these interpersonal struggles, Olivia excelled academically. She graduated as the valedictorian of her high school class and went on to study computer science at Stanford University. It was here that Olivia's controlling tendencies found a new outlet: technology. Her college roommate, Sarah Jennings, remembered Olivia's fascination with coding and surveillance software. "She was brilliant at it," Sarah said, "but sometimes it felt like she was using her skills to keep tabs on everyone around her. She'd casually mention things about our classmates that she couldn't possibly have known without some kind of digital snooping." After graduating with honors, Olivia secured a prestigious position at a tech startup. Colleagues described her as driven and meticulous, often working long hours to perfect her code. However, her personal life remained marked by tumultuous, short-lived relationships. Jason Tran, who dated Olivia for 6 months in 2019, described their relationship as intense and suffocating. "She wanted to know everything about my day, my thoughts, my plans," he said. "When I tried to set boundaries, she'd become angry or manipulative. It was exhausting." By early 2020, Olivia had moved back to Ashland, taking a remote position with her company. She left behind a trail of broken relationships, but no one could have predicted the dark turn her life would take when she met Ethan Reed. Ethan's life stood in stark contrast to Olivia's tumultuous journey. Born in 1990 in Ashland, Ethan was the youngest of 3 children in a close-knit family. His older sister, Amanda Reed, described their childhood as idyllic. "We grew up surrounded by nature, spending our summers hiking and our winters skiing. Ethan was always the peacemaker, the one who could make anyone laugh." Ethan had a passion for learning and a natural ability to connect with others. His high school English teacher, Mrs. Elaine Hoffman, remembered him fondly. "Ethan had a way of bringing out the best in his classmates. He was patient, kind, and had an infectious enthusiasm for literature. I always thought he'd make an excellent teacher someday." Mrs. Hoffman's prediction came true. After earning a degree in English literature, Ethan returned to his hometown to teach at Ashland High School. His personal life was characterized by steady, long-term relationships. His college girlfriend, Laura Simmons, remained a close friend even after their amicable breakup. "Ethan was always so balanced," she said. "He valued his independence but was also incredibly loyal and supportive. We broke up because our careers were taking us in different directions, but there was never any drama." Ethan and Olivia's fateful meeting took place on a sunny Saturday afternoon in May 2020 at a local farmer's market. Olivia, still adjusting to life in Ashland, had ventured out to explore her new surroundings. Ethan, a regular at the market, was picking up fresh produce for the week. Their eyes met over a display of organic apples, and Ethan, ever the friendly local, struck up a conversation about the best varieties for baking. Olivia, charmed by his easygoing nature and warm smile, found herself lingering at the stall far longer than she had planned. As they chatted, they discovered a shared love of classic literature and hiking. Impressed by Olivia's quick wit and intelligence, Ethan suggested they meet for a hike the following weekend. Olivia, feeling an instant connection, eagerly agreed. Their first date was a hike up Grizzly Peak, offering breathtaking views of the Rogue Valley. Ethan's friend, Mark, later recalled, "Ethan came back from that hike on Cloud 9. He couldn't stop talking about how smart and funny Olivia was, and how they talked for hours without any lull in the conversation." Over the following weeks, Olivia and Ethan's relationship blossomed rapidly. They spent long evenings discussing books, sharing meals, and exploring the natural beauty of Southern Oregon. To those around them, they seemed like the perfect match. However, even in the early days of their relationship, there were subtle signs of Olivia's possessive nature. Ethan's sister, Amanda, noticed that Olivia seemed to monopolize his time. She'd call or text constantly when they weren't together, and she always had a reason why Ethan couldn't join family gatherings without her. Ethan, blinded by the excitement of new love, brushed off these early warning signs. When his friend Mark expressed concern about the intensity of the relationship, Ethan laughed it off. "She's just excited about us," he said. "It'll calm down once we're more settled." Little did Ethan know that this was just the beginning of a pattern that would gradually tighten around him, slowly cutting him off from the life he had built. By the fall of 2020, Olivia had almost entirely taken up residence in Ethan's apartment, even though he had never officially asked her to move in. Despite this, she began to control nearly every facet of his daily life, dictating everything from his meals to how he spent his leisure time. Ethan's colleague and close friend, Jessica Lawson, who taught English alongside him, noticed unsettling changes in his behavior at work. Once a regular at after-school happy hours, Ethan started declining invitations, a stark contrast to his previous enthusiasm for these social gatherings. When I asked him why, he simply said Olivia wasn't comfortable with him staying out late, Jessica recalled. This seemed odd, especially since Olivia was familiar with most of the group and had even joined them on several occasions. Olivia's influence wasn't just confined to Ethan's personal life, it also extended to his social media. His once active Facebook and Instagram accounts became eerily quiet, with posts becoming scarce and devoid of any personal touch. When friends questioned him about the sudden change, Ethan would shrug it off, claiming he was trying to maintain more privacy online. However, it was Olivia's attempts to distance Ethan from his family that truly set off alarm bells. Amanda Reed, Ethan's sister, recalled a particularly disturbing event during the 2020 holiday season. "We always have a big family Christmas at our parents' house," she said. "But that year, Ethan called at the last minute to say he and Olivia wouldn't be coming. When I pushed for a reason, he told me Olivia wasn't feeling well and that he needed to stay with her. But I could hear her in the background, and she sounded perfectly fine." Olivia employed various emotional manipulation tactics to tighten her grip on Ethan. She would alternately shower him with affection and then subject him to cold, silent treatments whenever he didn't adhere to her wishes. Ethan's friend, Mark, recounted a camping trip they had been planning for months. The night before we were supposed to leave, Ethan called to cancel. He sounded so defeated, explaining that Olivia was upset about him going without her, even though she had been invited and had declined. As 2021 wore on, Olivia's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She began accusing Ethan of cheating on her, despite having no evidence. Her paranoia escalated to the point where she would unexpectedly show up at the high school where Ethan worked, under the guise of bringing him lunch. However, colleagues noted how she would scan the room, as if searching for signs of infidelity. Ethan's student, Emma Chin, later described a disturbing encounter. Ms. Rogan came into our classroom during lunch break, even though Mr. Reed wasn't there. She stayed anyway, asking us all sorts of questions about him. It felt really weird and invasive. Despite the mounting evidence of Olivia's controlling behavior, Ethan remained committed to the relationship. Those closest to him observed his growing stress and anxiety, but whenever they voiced their concerns, Ethan would dismiss them, often making excuses for Olivia. His sister, Amanda, confronted him directly during the summer of 2021. I told him I was worried, that this didn't seem like a healthy relationship, she said. But he just got defensive, insisting that I didn't understand Olivia, that she'd been hurt in the past and needed extra reassurance. He genuinely believed he could help her overcome her insecurities. As Olivia's paranoia and need for control reached new heights, she made a drastic decision that would irreversibly alter the course of their relationship, ultimately leading to its tragic end. In late August 2021, while Ethan was away at a weekend teaching conference, Olivia took the extreme step of installing hidden cameras throughout his apartment. This idea had been festering in Olivia's mind for weeks. With a background in software engineering, she found the technical aspects of the plan relatively easy to execute. Her growing suspicions about Ethan's fidelity gave her the justification she needed to push aside any moral doubts. Olivia meticulously planned every detail, purchasing small high-definition cameras disguised as everyday objects, a smoke detector, a phone charger, even a potted plant. She also set up advanced software that would allow her to monitor the feeds remotely from her laptop or phone. On the Friday afternoon that Ethan left for his conference, Olivia put her plan into action. Using the key Ethan had given her for emergencies, she gained unrestricted access to his apartment. Over the next several hours, she carefully placed cameras in the living room, kitchen, bedroom, and even the bathroom, ensuring that every corner of Ethan's private space was under constant surveillance. With the cameras in place and the software running smoothly, Olivia left the apartment, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and guilt. She convinced herself that this was a necessary measure, that it would alleviate her fears and allow her to trust Ethan completely. However, the first few days of monitoring proved uneventful. Olivia watched as Ethan went about his daily routines, grading papers, preparing lessons, chatting on the phone with his sister. But instead of calming her suspicions, the absence of incriminating evidence only fueled Olivia's paranoia. She began to obsess over minor details. Why did Ethan smile at that text message? Who was he looking for out the window? David Cho, a colleague of Olivia's, later recalled noticing changes in her behavior at work during this time. She seemed distracted, always checking her phone. I once caught a glimpse of her screen. It looked like a video feed, but she quickly closed it when she saw me looking. As days turned into weeks, Olivia's obsession with the camera feeds deepened. She began neglecting her work, her sleep suffered, and her interactions with Ethan became increasingly strained as she struggled to keep her secret. One evening, while reaching for a book on his shelf, Ethan noticed that several volumes were slightly out of place. He distinctly remembered organizing them just a few days earlier. In the bathroom, his toiletries seemed rearranged, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly how. More unsettling were the moments when he felt as if he was being watched. He'd be grading papers in the living room and suddenly feel a prickle on the back of his neck, as if someone's eyes were on him. But when he looked up, he was alone. Ethan's friend, Jessica Lawson, recalled the conversation they had during this period. "He mentioned feeling uneasy in his own home," she said. "He laughed it off, saying he was probably just stressed about work, but I could tell it was really bothering him." Olivia's behavior only added to Ethan's growing discomfort. She began making comments about his daily activities that she shouldn't have known about. Once, she mentioned in passing that she liked the new brand of coffee he'd bought, even though she hadn't been to his apartment in days. Another time, she asked about a phone call he'd had with his mother, though he was certain he hadn't mentioned it to her. When Ethan expressed confusion about these slip-ups, Olivia would quickly change the subject or offer vague explanations. He must have mentioned the coffee in passing, or perhaps his mother had told her about the call. As his unease intensified, Ethan found himself questioning his own memories and perceptions. "Am I just being paranoid?" he wondered. "Is the stress of work getting to me?" Despite his attempts to rationalize the strange occurrences, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. He began paying closer attention to his surroundings, noting any changes or oddities in his apartment. He even considered confiding in his sister, Amanda, but hesitated, worried that his suspicions might sound absurd or that he might be overreacting. The moment of revelation came on an October evening in 2021. Ethan had been grading papers late into the night, the soft glow of his laptop illuminating the living room as he stretched, and as Ethan was preparing to call it a night, his elbow accidentally knocked over a small potted plant from the side table. The pot shattered on the hardwood floor, scattering soil and ceramic fragments across the room. As he knelt to clean up the mess, something caught his eye amid the debris, a tiny lens, no bigger than a pencil eraser, glinting in the dim light. Ethan's heart raced as he carefully retrieved the object from the soil. It was a miniature camera, expertly hidden within the plant space. The discovery sent a chill down his spine. With trembling hands, Ethan began a frantic search of his apartment. Over the next hour, he uncovered 5 more hidden cameras, one in the smoke detector, another in a picture frame, and even one in the showerhead. The realization that his most private moments had been under surveillance was overwhelming. Ethan's mind raced as he pieced together the implications, the strange comments Olivia had made, her uncanny knowledge of his daily routines, the eerie feeling of being watched. It all suddenly made horrifying sense. The woman he had loved and trusted had invaded his privacy in the most intimate way imaginable. In a daze, Ethan called the one person he knew he could trust without question, his sister Amanda. Despite the late hour, she answered on the second ring, immediately sensing the distress in his voice. "Ethan, what's wrong?" she asked, concern evident in her tone. Struggling to hold back tears, Ethan recounted his shocking discovery. Amanda listened in stunned silence, her initial disbelief quickly turning to anger on her brother's behalf. As Ethan's story unfolded, Amanda's protective instincts kicked in. "You need to get out of there," she insisted. "Pack a bag and come to my place. We'll figure this out together." But Ethan was torn. A part of him wanted to confront Olivia immediately, to demand answers. Another part of him was numb with betrayal, struggling to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with someone capable of such a gross violation of his trust. In the end, it was Amanda's steady voice that guided his next steps. "Document everything," she advised. "Take pictures of the cameras, save any recordings you can find. We'll go to the police in the morning." As the first light of dawn broke over Ashland, Ethan sat on his couch, surrounded by the dismantled remains of Olivia's surveillance network. His phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Good morning, babe. Sleep well?" The irony of her feigned normalcy was not lost on Ethan. With a deep breath, he typed out a response that would set in motion the final, tragic act of their relationship. "We need to talk. Come over as soon as you can." The tension in Ethan's apartment was palpable as Olivia arrived later that morning. She entered with her usual smile, leaning in for a kiss, but froze when she saw Ethan's grim expression and the array of dismantled cameras on the coffee table. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then Olivia's face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. "Ethan, I can explain," she began, her voice trembling. But Ethan, his voice low and controlled, cut her off. He spoke of trust betrayed, of the sanctity of privacy violated. With each word, Olivia seemed to shrink, her usual confidence evaporating in the face of her exposed deception. When Ethan finally fell silent, Olivia launched into a desperate justification of her actions. She spoke of her deep-seated insecurities, her fear of losing him, her conviction that if she could just prove to herself that he was faithful, she could finally relax into their relationship. Her words came out in a rush, pleading and explanatory, but Ethan remained unmoved. "I can't be with someone who would do this," he said firmly. "We're done, Olivia. I want you to leave." Olivia's demeanor changed in an instant. Her tears dried up, replaced by a cold, hard look. "You can't do this to me," she hissed. "We're perfect together. You're overreacting." As Ethan stood firm in his decision, Olivia's pleas turned to threats. She spoke of ruining his career, of telling his students and colleagues about embarrassing moments she had captured on camera. When these threats failed to sway Ethan, she resorted to emotional manipulation, threatening self-harm if he left her. Throughout it all, Ethan remained resolute. Even as his heart broke at the sight of Olivia's desperation, he knew with surprising clarity that there was no coming back from this betrayal. Finally, seeing that her words were having no effect, Olivia stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her. Ethan sank onto the couch, emotionally exhausted, believing the worst was over. But he had no idea that Olivia's desperation was about to take a far more dangerous turn. The events of October 15, 2021, would forever be etched in the memories of Ashland's residents. The day began like any other, with no indication of the tragedy that would unfold. Ethan, drained from the confrontation with Olivia, had called in sick to work. He spent the morning talking with his sister Amanda, making plans to file a police report about the hidden cameras. As evening approached, he decided to take a walk to clear his head, leaving his phone behind to avoid any desperate messages from Olivia. It was during this absence that Olivia made her final, fatal return to Ethan's apartment. Neighbors would later report seeing her enter the building, her face set in a mask of determination. She used her key to let herself in, her mind racing with a mix of anger, desperation, and a twisted sense of righteous indignation. When Ethan returned home around 7 p.m., he found Olivia waiting for him in the darkened living room. The sight of her there, uninvited and unexpected, sent a jolt of fear through him. "Olivia, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice wary. Olivia's response was chilling in its calmness. "We're going to fix this, Ethan," she said. "You'll see that we belong together." What followed was a heated argument that quickly spiraled out of control. Olivia oscillated between pleading for another chance and spewing accusations, her emotions a volatile mix of love, jealousy, and possessiveness. The confrontation took a dark turn as Olivia's desperation led her to actions that would change their lives forever. Ethan, his patience completely worn thin, demanded that Olivia leave immediately after she lashed out with harsh accusations. It was at this breaking point that Olivia's fragile composure shattered. In a shocking move, even to those aware of her obsessive tendencies, she pulled out a kitchen knife she had taken from Ethan's own drawer. The next few moments were a chaotic blur of violence and terror. Caught off guard by the sudden escalation, Ethan attempted to reason with Olivia while retreating from the menacing blade. However, Olivia was beyond reasoning. She lunged at him with the knife, her desperation driving her forward. In the ensuing struggle, Ethan's background as a former high school wrestler proved invaluable. He grappled with Olivia, desperately trying to disarm her without causing injury. Yet, in her frenzied state, Olivia's strength seemed almost superhuman. Neighbors would later recount hearing the sounds of shouts and breaking glass, one of them concerned enough to call 911. But tragically, help would arrive too late. When the police finally forced their way into Ethan's apartment, they were met with a grim scene. Ethan lay on the floor, his body marred by multiple stab wounds, the life already draining from his eyes. Olivia sat beside him, the bloody knife still clenched in her hand, her eyes vacant as she stared at what she had done. Paramedics rushed in, but their attempts to save Ethan were futile. Olivia, showing no resistance, was taken into custody by the police. Her only words, repeated over and over like a broken record, were, "He was supposed to love me forever." The investigation, led by Detective Sarah Ongwen of the Ashland Police Department, soon uncovered the full extent of Olivia's surveillance operation. Months of invasive monitoring were revealed, leaving behind a digital trail that, along with physical evidence from the crime scene and witness statements, painted a damning picture of obsession and premeditated violence. Ethan's family and friends were left devastated by his death. His sister Amanda, in particular, was overwhelmed with guilt, saying in a tearful interview, "I knew something was wrong. I should have pushed harder, done more to get him away from her." As the investigation continued, more details of Olivia's troubled past came to light. Former colleagues and ex-boyfriends came forward with stories of her controlling behavior and emotional manipulation. Her parents, stunned by their daughter's actions, could only offer tearful apologies to Ethan's family. The district attorney meticulously built the case against Olivia, presenting a methodical narrative of her obsessive behavior. Covert surveillance footage played a central role, starkly illustrating the extent of her invasion into Ethan's life. The defense did not contest the basic facts but focused on Olivia's mental state, bringing in expert witnesses to testify about her history of attachment issues and borderline personality disorder. They argued that her actions were the result of a mental health crisis, not premeditated murder. Olivia herself took the stand, her testimony an unsettling blend of remorse and rationalization. She spoke of her deep love for Ethan and her fear of abandonment, insisting that she never meant to hurt him. Her apparent inability to fully grasp the gravity of her actions left many in the courtroom disturbed. After a 2-week trial and 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict on charges of first-degree murder. At the sentencing hearing, the judge condemned Olivia's actions in a scathing speech before sentencing her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the town of Ashland slowly began to heal, the community was left to reflect on the nature of love, trust, and the human capacity for both compassion and cruelty. The case would be remembered not only for its shocking conclusion, but also as a catalyst for change and a somber reminder of the importance of recognizing and addressing toxic relationships before they spiral into tragedy.